Hello and good evening, and welcome to York University Astronomy and Astrophysics podcast, written and presented by the students, faculty, alumni, and friends of York University. You will now find us wherever podcasts are distributed. I'm Paul Mackin, one of your hosts this evening, and I am joined by Professor Mary Helen Armour. We are broadcasting live from the Allan Carswell Observatory, located at the Keele campus of York University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. York University broadcasts live every Monday at 9 p.m. local time, or currently 1 a.m. Tuesday Universal Time at York U Observatory. We also run in concert with our online public viewing, or as we call it, the OPV feed run by the observatory staff, who are not going to be doing live observing tonight because it's cloudy. Navigate, but we will be showing some great archival images. To navigate to our live show and find out more about us, please check out our website at yorku.ca/science/observatory and follow the link to our online public viewing chat on YouTube. Any questions or comments you may have on past shows or suggestions for future topics, please send us an email at observe@yorku.ca. You can also always connect with us on Instagram with the handle at YorkU Observatory or on Facebook at Allan I Carswell Ob. All of our programs are free, but if you'd like to make a donation, and we'd certainly appreciate that, please see our website at yorku.ca/science/observatory. We'll be monitoring the YouTube chat for questions and post content. Sorry. Tonight's weather, as I said, isn't great. So we're going to be showing some wonderful archival images. It's cloudy where I am. I think it's cloudy down at the observatory. How about you, Professor Armour? Any scars were in the sky where you are?
Definitely cloudy. Early this morning, we had some beautiful clear skies, but it didn't last long, and I suspect more snow is on the way.
Yeah, I managed to get my telescope out for one night, Friday night. It clouded over before sunrise and started snowing. But the good news is my telescope's pretty smart and shuts down when its programmed observing is done. So I just got to play with the images in the morning, which was wonderful. Um, so it's time for our holiday show. We've never done this before. It's the first time we're doing it, and I hope it becomes a holiday tradition here at the observatory. We're going to get into books, astronomy gifts, and stocking stuffers a bit later, but let's start with the astronomical phenomena, which is tied to the singular event in the pantheon of Christian Christmas traditions, the Star of Bethlehem. Professor, you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. There's always been a lot of speculation about what this could have been. I mean, it always comes up. Now, a couple of problems with it. First of all, the only real record we have, the only sort of recounting is in the Gospel of Matthew. Both Matthew and the Gospels for both Matthew and Luke talk about uh, Christ's birth, but unfortunately, only Matthew talks about the Star of Bethlehem. And the thing is, he talks about the wise men or the magi following the star. So that sort of has a bit of a setting. And in that day and age, wise men or magi, one of the key things they would have been doing is observing the skies, mostly for astrological purposes, to try and sort of divine what was going to happen in the future. So it's not unreasonable to think that, some kind of observation in the night sky could have been tied to this. So the question is, what might it have been? So the some of the, more spectacular ones that pop up or are something like a nova or supernova. The catch with a nova or supernova is if they do show, they'd be very bright, and they would also have been seen in the records of other cultures. The Chinese astronomers were great for recording things like comets, supernovas, novas. So we have a fair bit of, sort of historical background, and certainly other areas around there would have recorded that. There's nothing like that really recorded. So not likely a nova or a supernova. Could it have been a meteorite, like a shooting star? Possibly, but they were supposed to have quote unquote followed this. So that seems a bit unlikely because that would have been a very transient and rapid one. Another possibility is a comet. The Chinese do record something called the Broom Star in that era, in around that, a few years either side of sort of, 1 BC, 1 AD. There was one called the Broom Comet. But again, these were kind of known phenomenon, and like the other thing about them is they were seen broadly by many people. And the other problem with comets is they were generally considered a harbinger of some kind of evil. So that's probably not it. What most people tend to sort of focus on if they're thinking about Star of Bethlehem, the first thing they think is not necessarily sort of a star the way we think of it. You have to remember the Magi were probably astrologers, observing the sky. And so what they were probably seeing is they think it was the most likely explanation, if it actually was something, which is another question entirely, was probably some kind of planetary conjunction. In and around that time frame, like I said, within a couple of years, either side of sort of that transition from BC to AD, there were a couple of very interesting conjunctions. And they all involved the planet Jupiter. And that's quite significant because, of course, in astrology, Jupiter is often sort of considered sort of one of the kings of planets in the Middle Eastern astrology. So Jupiter could have been associated with a king. You also have, of course, one of the major conjunctions in around that time was actually Jupiter and Saturn, who got very, very close to each other. And at times they would have been so close they almost would have looked like a single object. In that time frame, there were also conjunctions of Jupiter and Venus, at least one quite spectacular one. Seems, being that they were quote unquote following a star, following may have been, depending on the translation, we may be taking it a little too literally. It may have been more of a case that they interpreted one of these conjunctions as involving a king and being in a certain part of the world because of other things they were reading in the sky. And this is what becomes the Star of Bethlehem later on, right? So that, like that is a possibility. And if, the Star of Bethlehem actually was something, given that it was the Magi following the star, quote unquote, that seems to be a more likely one, that they saw some kind of omen in the stars that sent them uh, uh, traveling towards eventually Bethlehem. Now, how much this story has all been embellished, yeah, problematic. I mean, one of the things that both Matthew and Luke were doing when they were writing the Gospels is trying to make them fit in to older prophecies about, the Jewish Messiah. So it's an interesting question whether the Star of Bethlehem was something real or was it more something astrological that was, read by these wise men? And even, if it only happened a little bit, really recorded a little bit afterwards, that it eventually made it into Matthew's gospel. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
The problem is it's the evidence is so thin. It's fun to speculate, but in all honesty, we'll probably never really know.
Yeah, and there's a lot we don't know. We don't know what year this happened actually. I mean, there's no, there's no, I mean, if there was an astronomical phenomena that was recorded by someone other than, in the Bible, by someone like the Chinese who are very good record keepers about this, or other cultures that recorded astronomical events, then we'd have a signpost to stick it to, but we don't, and we don't really even know what time of year this happened at either. There are clues in the Bible and other sources that it wasn't winter. I mean, the phrase "shepherds watch their flocks at night." Well, shepherds watch their flocks at night in Judea during times when they would graze in the open fields because you have to keep the wolves away, right? And the bigger the area you have to protect, you have to watch at night, which was after the harvest and before the planting season. So typically summer through early autumn. The biblical accounts of shepherds in fields at night during Jesus' birth is often used to suggest the birth occurred outside of December because winter is cold and rainy in Judea, and the sheep would be kept, in a more protected area at that time. Um, Also, Christmas is suspiciously close to the winter solstice, which the Roman Empire celebrated with the festival of Saturnalia, which is the festival honoring the god Saturn. And that later evolved into the sun cult, Sol Invictus. Um, uh, these festivals, which often included gift giving, feasting, a version of social roles, were popular events that influenced modern Christian traditions. So, there's a lot not to know here. I mean, take, these comments are not meant to offend anyone or anything else. We're looking at this from an astronomical and chronological point of view. And the big answer is there's a story in the Bible. We don't know much about that from an astronomy point of view, but if you're a believer of that and the story gives you joy, then that's one more piece of joy to add to the Christmas and holiday season.
I mean,
So, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's just kind of interesting because if you look, it's not just the Romans. Most cultures who lived far enough away from the equator for it to be noticeable mark the solstice somehow, right? So it
Oh,
doesn't,
yeah,
it's quite
for sure.
understandable how, Christianity decided to drop it on there. And part of that may be that, like there's some vague references in the Bible, but they just didn't record birth dates, the way we do now. Like they just didn't have the same kind of record keeping. So even at the time, they may not have known exactly when he
Right.
was born. Like so someone
Yeah.
decided, well, like this is, a dawning and the days are getting longer. So we'll just put it in there because of the associations. Fair
Yeah,
enough, right?
yeah, and the winter solstice is. If you think about it, you're getting less sunlight every day, and suddenly, for reasons unknown but predictably, you start to get more sunlight every day. Well, the fact that the sun isn't going away entirely is wonderful, and that's something to celebrate. And that's likely where the tradition of Christmas at this time of year comes from. But we've looked at the history a bit now, and it's time to think about what to getting our astronomer friend or wannabe astronomer friends and loved ones for Christmas. So, we're going to start off with astronomy and science fiction books. Um, we're going to start off initially with just astronomy and science books, and then later we'll get into science fiction. So, what we have is a couple of categories, and each of us is going to recommend separately or together one book. Um, we may have some honorable mentions as well, but we're going to start with astronomy. So, I'm going to start with a brief history of black holes and why nearly everything you know about them is wrong by Dr. Becky Smethurst. Now, I was fortunate enough to meet Dr. Smethurst, about a year ago. She gave a talk at York University on black holes. This is her area of speciality. She is an excellent astrophysicist and at Oxford University, and her speciality is the super black holes. In the very large black holes in the center of galaxies. Um, she's called Dr. Becky, and she's a great science communicator. She's got her own own YouTube channel, absolutely worth following. She's also got, I believe, a couple of podcasts. And this book is really accessible. It goes into the history of the science behind black holes. Um, it talks about uh, the very sad story about the physicist who predicted it and died in the First World War. Uh, it talks about the science black holes, what we know about them, what we don't understand, the science behind Hawking radiation, which is incredibly fascinating. And that was she actually talks about the fact that black holes really aren't black because they're not absorbing all the energy that comes into them. They emit a little bit, they radiate. and how that works. She also talks about, and this is, I used to teach astronomy to kids in grade 3 to 6, and she talks about the very fun but incredibly scary and grotesque concept of spaghettification, where if you got too close to a black hole, the gravity on your legs would be significantly greater than the gravity attracting your head and upper body, and you'd be pulled apart into a long strands of yourself, kind of spaghetti. You wouldn't really notice it because of time dilation and a few other things. But she also talks about why black holes are important, and it's just a great read. And as I said, you don't need to be a physicist to read it. It's not written for physicists, but it's written for people who are interested in astronomy. What about you, Mary Helen? What's
Yeah,
your
well,
book choice?
I was going to go with Chasing New Horizons, and this is inside the first epic mission to Pluto. And it's written by Alan Stern and David Grinspoon. And Alan Stern, in particular, was the lead investigator on this. And I mean, this was a project a long time in the making. And if nothing else, it took 10 years from launch to actual Pluto flyby. So he goes into sort of a lot of, I guess, background about this that you wouldn't normally get in the news. So it's sort of his history of it, which is quite fascinating to get the viewpoint of one of the scientists actually involved. And I remember seeing him speak at a conference quite a number of years ago, but they talked quite a bit about the New Horizons. And then I remember the actual New Horizon flyby when they had everybody there, including, of course, Brian May of Queen fame, because, of course, he does have a PhD in astrophysics. So, like one of those interesting connections. But if you're interested in sort of like space missions, and New Horizons is, like really sort of pushing the boundaries to send something that far out and to take that long to reach your target is really kind of a fascinating mission.
I recently had to do a presentation at York on cryovolcanoes, and which are very, very, very cold volcanic activity in the outer solar system. And I actually one of Alan Stern's papers was referenceable in that paper. And Brian May, I mean, he got invited for good reasons, because he did his dissertation on the mass density of the outer solar system, or something akin to that. I don't have it off the top of my head, but and I believe he even wrote a song for it. But Brian May, my big Brian May joke is every time a student takes a class in general relativity, uh, the song 39 by Queen comes to mind, because it's a song about relativity. But yeah, no, a fascinating mission, and it was a very, how to get a spacecraft to Pluto. Build a very small spacecraft, put it on the biggest rocket you can find, send it by Jupiter for a gravity assist, and go screamingly through the Pluto dwarf planet region. Just incredible. And the pictures are still really great. It was originally conceived as two missions, approximately 3 days apart, although they would have probably been longer, but it would have been some multiple of 3 days apart, because Pluto rotates in 6 days, and they wanted to catch both sides. We didn't really get good imaging of half of Pluto, but what we got was amazing. So yeah, Alan Stern, kind of a hero of mine. I want to specialize in planetary astronomy, so it's right up my alley. It's a great suggestion. Uh, I'm going to give an honorable mention as well here. There's a book that I actually give it away every Christmas. If I look behind me at my bookshelf, yeah, there's 4 or 5 copies. So some lucky people will be getting a copy again this year. It's called The Demon Haunted World: Science as a Candle in the Dark. And it's written by Carl Sagan. Um, Sagan was a gifted scientist, a wonderful writer, great science communicator. And this was the last book published before his death in 1996. Now, he knew he was dying, so it's a bit of a legacy book. And it predicts very clearly the war on science that we've seen over the years and talks about fact-based analysis and the lack of same. But he also lays out a process to communicate uh, actual factful information and interpretation. He discusses the scientific method at length and also provides a tool, something that I use almost every day, called his baloney detection kit. Um, it has another name also beginning with B, but we won't get into what it is. But he was a very polite gentleman and didn't use the other B word, so he called it the baloney detection kit. But it basically goes through the idea of critical thinking. It gives you the idea of logical fallacies. It gives you the idea of red herrings, how to detect these things. It's just a great book. And when both of my sons, who moved away to go to university, went, I gave them a copy of that book before they left. Neither of those young men went into science at all. But I think one's a historian and one was a journalist, and they both they both benefited, I think, from at least a quick glance at it. And my daughter will be getting one next year when she goes to university. So it's just a great book.
Yeah, it's a fascinating book because Sagan throughout his career did have to deal with a lot of this stuff in his day and age. It wasn't as prevalent because you didn't have, social media the way you have now to give all these, slightly wacky ideas a platform and to be able to sort of push disinformation quite the same way. But it's interesting because even now on YouTube, you can see him doing little clips around sort of this, baloney detection as you've referred to it. And it's like I said, it's interesting. I've read parts of the book, but I don't think I've ever read the whole thing.
Well,
Um,
yeah, the other nice thing about the book, though, is it's public domain. You can buy a copy, and all the online sellers have it, and I do buy copies. But if you look around on the web, the entire thing is there, unabridged, online, free. So let not cost be an issue here, okay? Or if you like ebooks, it's available for free that way, or you can buy an ebook copy as well. But yeah, it's a great book. It really is. So we're going a little faster than I expected today. So I think we're going to move into our next topic before the reminders break, which is science fiction books. So Mary Helen, I think you're first up here.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a tough one for me because I am a heavy duty consumer of sci-fi, but I was thinking in terms of, what book sort of relates a lot to sort of current events and things like that. And one of the ones that popped out is Space 2001, not the first book, but the whole series, because there are actually four books in the series. And the interesting thing about Space 2001 is if we think in terms of sort of what's going on now, first of all, in the sort of the series, one of the big things was they turned Europa into a habitable world. And of course, right now the JUICE mission is on the way out there to actually study Jupiter's icy moons, but in particular, take a closer look at Europa to see if they can find is it actually possible for life to exist there, or does life actually exist there? The other very interesting thing that I kind of thought about when I was thinking about the series, of course, in 2001, they get taken over by HAL, who is basically an AI, run computer. And, like in the current I guess, AI boom, it's sort of interesting to think in terms of like, well, here's how, here's what could go wrong. So it's an interesting series because it has all these sort of ties, even though these were written decades ago. It still has all these sort of interesting ties to the current science. Like Arthur C. Clarke was a fascinating author that way because he really brought in a lot of science that in some ways was way ahead of its time, right? When you consider of how he is sort of writing. So, the Space 2001, it's a classic. but it's one of those ones that if you're into sci-fi and space reading at all, it has to be on the list, just because of how he touches on a topic even that long ago that still has relevance nowadays. Like some of it obviously reads kind of hokey, but if you really read, it's not that far off from how we're doing things now or how we're sort of doing the science now. So it's quite interesting to see.
Yeah, it's as you said, there's four books. There's 2001: A Space Odyssey. There's 2010 Odyssey 2. There's 2061 Odyssey 3, and there's 3001, which is I think called the Final Odyssey. And of the four of them, three are great. 2061 is probably the weakest of the three, and he went down some paths in 2061 that he ended up not pursuing in 3001. 2001, of course, if you've ever seen the movie, and people should see the movie. I recognize that it's not the most accessible film in the world. It doesn't have a linear story. For a movie that's 3 hours long, it only has 45 minutes of dialogue. It's very visual. But the book does an excellent job of explaining. The book is a companion piece. The movie is not a film of a novel, and the novel is not a novelization of a movie. They are companion pieces. So the book does an excellent job of really explaining what's going on in the movie. Um, there's also the movie 2010, and that film didn't get really as much kudos, which was kind of a shame because it was a good movie. But 3001 is wonderful. It kind of looks at, and this is something Clark did very well, how far can you take technology? And he came up with the idea that, sufficiently advanced technology to a sufficiently primitive culture would be magic, basically. So you see there are technologies that we would consider almost magical, and he explains them, and it's marvelous. So I'm a big fan of this series, and I'm a huge fan of Arthur Clarke, who, in addition to everything else, was just a darn good writer. He really was. So my choice, a little more contemporary, although we're going to have some honorable mentions here as well. My choice is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Now, a lot of people have seen The Martian, and of course, it's a book. And Project Hail Mary has some similarities, and it's a movie coming in February. But the book I read it about 2 years ago, and it's a very simple story. It's about this guy who wakes up and he seems to be in some sort of hospital bed, kind of wrapped up in it, tended by robotic arms. And he doesn't know who he is, doesn't know his name, doesn't know where he is or why he's there. And he can't get out of this. He eventually gets out of the hospital bed. And the only thing in the room with him and the robot are two other beds with two other robots, both of which contain dead bodies. And he has no idea what's going on. And the book does a great job of walking you through both his memory recovering, and that's done as sort of a separate track in parallel, and him solving the problem that he is in this place to solve. And he's there for a very important, very specific reason. And as I said, the movie's coming in March. I'm really looking forward to it. But if you're looking for something a little more contemporary, much funnier, and it's got great, and I mean great characters. So I'll just put that one out there. And then I think we've got some honorable mentions. So I would start with one that Professor Armour and I have mentioned several times on this show, Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. And it is a book about first contact, sort of, with aliens, and just a tremendously good book. And every time an interstellar comet comes along and some professor down at MIT or wherever says, it's a spacecraft, basically, he read Rendezvous with Rama. And he's channeling it. But you also picked another Clarke book as well that I also like. What was
Yeah.
that one? Mary Helen?
Yeah, that was the Fountains of Paradise, and I always found this one fascinating because of the technology behind it. Like, as we put more and more spaceships into orbit, it becomes more and more problematic. There's more space junk, and enough space launches will sort of do some damage to the atmosphere. So in this book, this is sort of, I don't think he was the originator of the idea, but he took it and ran with it. The idea of a space elevator, where you have a massive elevator that's basically tied to a rock in geosynchronous orbit right above the equator. And rather than using spacecraft, just have this giant sort of elevator that goes from ground level up to the rock. And this book looks at sort of the idea of building this elevator. And it's like I said, if you look at space elevator, you can find whole Wikipedia pages and all kinds of stuff about it. It's probably technologically still a fair ways away from us, but it's just kind of a fascinating concept, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it absolutely is. And it's a charming book. There's a parallel track going on at about extraterrestrial intelligence, and um, there is some medical predictions in there uh, with a wonderful device called Cora,
Yeah.
which is just fascinating. And it is the first book that I ever read that Arthur Clarke predicted the communication satellite, and he's predicted the space elevator. But the Fountains of Paradise, he also predicts the internet. And it's just so well done. So yeah, it's a great little book. And you also mentioned Ben Bova in your write up today, who wrote some great books as well. So tell us about the books you suggested by him for
Yeah,
honorable
so
mention.
the one I always thought was his best one was his Mars book. It's basically about the first landing of humans on Mars, which again is quite topical when you think about, this sort of push to eventually go back to the moon and back to Mars. And that was had to be my favorite one. But he's written a whole sort of tour of the grand tour of the solar system series, as they call it, where he has sort of stories of, humans living on all kinds of planets. So it's really kind of a fascinating one. Again, like it's written quite a while ago, but at the same time, it has it still resonates when you're starting to talk about humans moving out into the solar system. Some of it, the technology isn't quite on, but a lot of it is, pretty similar to the kind of things that we're going to want to do. So it's kind of an interesting book that way.
Yeah, Bova, he was an interesting writer. He wrote a lot of things. I always found him a bit inconsistent, but when he hit when he hit his stride, he was fantastic. And uh, that leads me to the last of the books we're going to do before our break, which is I'm going to suggest two other honorable mentions, and they're a pair: The Mote in God's Eye and its sequel, The Gripping Hand by Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell, which is an alien first contact story. It's humorous. The aliens are extremely plausible, and humanity's reaction to them is spelled out beautifully. And it's in the far future. There's mankind has spread throughout the galaxy, but has never discovered another intelligent species. And finally, they do. And it's this just fascinating story. It's very good. But I think at that point, I'm going to move on to our reminders. So you're listening to the York Universe Holiday Special. We're broadcasting live from the Allan Carswell Observatory at York University in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Please look at our website at yorku.ca/science/observatory to join in the chat. If you have any questions or want to see some of our content, tonight you're listening to Mary Helen Armour and myself, Paul Mackin. We've been discussing Christmas gifts and the Star of Bethlehem. So we've covered science books and we've covered science fiction books. And we're going to get into some other stuff in a minute, but I do want to talk about our tours. We have regular tours. York University is slowly closing down as exams come. So we have regular tours this Wednesday and on December 17th, 2 weeks later. And then we're on break until January 14th. Now, tickets are free. You just go to our website, get a ticket, show up. It's a ton of fun. And you get to see some amazing technology. So please come and join us. Okay, so before we started today, well, Professor Armour and I were writing this show. We were talking about science fiction books, and we're both science fiction fans. So we also talked a little bit about the idea of um, holiday
Binge
being a
watching.
chance. Yeah, yeah.
Binge watching.
Basically, get your popcorn, sit on the couch. It's darn cold outside. Let's binge watch. So, Mary Helen, the first one is to you.
Yeah, so this was actually one I bought for my sort of winter binge watching was the Babylon 5 series. It ran for 5 seasons, I believe it was, and ran
Yeah, it
to
was
about
five
90
seasons. Yeah,
and ran to about 90 episodes, so there's lots to watch. And it was a fascinating sort of sci-fi series with, the usual good guy, bad guy, like interaction, but it's quite interesting because it gets pretty gritty. It's quite real in some ways. It does develop the personalities fairly well, and I think it has a certain sort of dark realism to it that's, kind of gives it some interesting flavor. Now, this was done in the 1990s, but when you sort of watch the political background in it, you can still see parallels to like the kind of things that go on even to this day. So human nature hasn't changed. And overall, as sci-fi shows go, it hasn't aged badly. It doesn't look too hokey when it comes to the technology and stuff like that. So it's done a decent job that way. Um,
that's great.
it's and like it's one of these sci-fi shows that like they do the first season and they have no idea how well it's going to take off, and it did. It's a little hard to find because it does not show up on the Netflix or any of that. You actually the only way to get it really is to buy the discs of it. But that's also nice because then you don't need an internet connection and you don't need to pay a subscription fee. You just buy it and then you have it and you can watch as many times as you want,
Yeah,
which has some real attractions. But it's like I said, I enjoyed it a lot when it was actually running in the 90s. When you go back to it, it's like, yeah, it's still a good show, um, even compared to the kind of stuff we have now. So,
yeah. A comment. You can get it on disc. Yes, you can also buy it on iTunes. I can't talk about other streaming services. I don't know, but you can buy it
oh, okay.
on iTunes. Buy all 5 seasons. That's how I got it. But it's a superlative show. Quick question for you, Mary Helen. Do you have a favorite character?
Favorite character. I always liked Lando.
Yeah, you got to go with Londo. You got to
Yeah,
go with Londo.
as as as
Emperor Londo Malari. Yes.
yeah, he's a fascinating character, and I guess it's the way he gets himself into
Yeah.
trouble, so to speak, and then
Yeah.
kind of comes back out the other end. Uh, some of the sub characters, the basically aides to the ambassadors, Lanier and Veer are also quite interesting characters. So
Yeah.
I
They
mean,
are.
it's
They are.
fascinating because they do build this sort of central cast that's got thing. And of course, the character I think that fascinates a lot of sci-fi people is Walter Koenig, who of course played Chekhov in the original Star Trek. Comes as a sort of evil psychop, which is their sort of telepath.
Telepathic police
Yeah,
force. Yeah.
yeah, and it's fascinating because he plays this sort of somewhat disagreeable, but like character, and yet he's not quite evil, but he's certainly not good.
Yeah. He's not good. He's got his own agenda. Let's just say
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um, but Babylon 5 was originally pitched as a Star Trek series. And this actually caused some quite controversy, and the producers of Star Trek turned it down. But they used the idea, and they came up with their own version of it in a weird way, um, which followed some of the nature of Babylon 5, and that was Deep Space Nine. And you can get in trouble for saying this, but I actually think that was the best of ever all Star Trek series. And I have watched every single Star Trek series since they first came on the air in the 1960s. I was a kid, but I was watching them. So I actually think Deep Space Nine is also worth watching. The first season is a bit uneven. Uh, and the second season starts to pick up and then it gets better. But when you hit season four, okay, now you're 100 episodes in at that point. But when you hit, or 75, when you hit season four, buckle up, grab the popcorn. It's one continuous story till the end of season seven, and it is remarkable. So I would pitch that one.
Yeah.
And the other one I would go with, and which is not, these are older shows, uh, is Foundation. Now, Mary Helen, have you seen it?
No, I have not, but of course, being a sci-fi junkie, I have read all of the Foundation books.
Right. So this is a modern, I mean, the Foundation books were written coming up on 100 years ago. They were written in the 1940s. So, we're 85 years odd in, and or 80 anyway. But this is a modern take on it. So there are certain, technologies such as cloning and a few other things are mentioned, which there was no concept of in the book. Artificial intelligence plays a very big part of it, and it does meld, as Asimov did himself, the robot series and the classic Foundation series. But we've just fit the first season again, as is often the case, a little uneven, but it gets you by the end. Season two is amazing. Season three was amazing, and we just finished season three. Yes, we just finished season three. Season four is coming in another year. So great characters, really fun. The villains, there's one particular character, but he's not one character. He's actually, so far, we've seen 9 versions of this character. And evil personified in every case. It's quite great. So I would highly recommend it. And Mary Helen, once you finish Babylon 5, I'd go straight to Foundation.
I may
So
have
we're
to go
gonna
back and I may have to go back and watch some DS9 because I hadn't quite caught that, but yeah, they do have a lot of similarities with the B5. It's just DS9 was dark for a Star Trek series. I think that was what
very.
put a lot of people off. Like a lot
Oh,
of
it's
the
very
rest of the
dark.
Star Trek was very sort of light and airy, and the good guy always wins and sort of
Yeah,
high-minded. DS9 was a little grittier, shall we say?
it's a
A
war
little bit
story.
darker.
Yeah, it's a war story. It's a single war. You don't even know for 3 seasons that you're in a war, but you are. So, but we're moving on, and it's time to get into some other gifts: telescopes and binoculars. So, uh, I guess I'm kind of the telescope and binocular guy on this podcast. So I'm going to give some general guidance, and then we'll talk about a couple of options. So first of all, some general guidance here. We all go Christmas shopping, and you go to a store, and they've got a telescope. And it's a nice shiny box, and it looks really impressive, and you can see the scope, and it's got a lens at one end, and it's got an eyepiece at the other, and it's on a tripod. So if you see something in a flashy box for a couple $100, look for something anywhere on the box that mentions magnification. Doesn't even matter what number it gives you. If it mentions magnification on a bright, shiny box, don't buy it. That's a warning sign not to buy. Okay? You're going to spend a lot less money on a pair of binoculars, and they won't ruin the hobby for you. You buy that telescope, you look at something on it, and it won't show you what you think it will show you. It'll be disappointing, and you're just going to have a miserable time. You won't even be able to get it to point to the objects half the time. So, a lot of good options, from binoculars, which do a better job than you might think, to low-end telescopes, which are available on a budget. And then you can also get into some things that are called astrographs, which I'll talk about in a second. But please do your research because nothing can destroy an interest in astronomy faster than a useless telescope. So, you know, if it's, people who like science often like multiple sciences, and I occasionally do a bit of bird watching. I'm far from a bird watcher, but I like it. And so I've got a pair of binoculars. If I look over in my cupboard there, I can see them just as I'm talking. I use them for both bird watching and for astronomy. A
I
good
mean,
pair of
that's,
binoculars, like
yeah.
10 by 50s.
Yeah, I
What were
mean, a
you going to
good
say,
pair of
Mary?
binoculars you can do so much with. So they're good for
Absolutely.
astronomy, they're good for bird watching. You can, you can do so many things with them that you're not limited. And I have had so many people ask me, well, what would you buy starting off? I said a good pair of binoculars, because if you get bored, you can always switch to bird watching. Um,
Yeah.
and it's good advice. I mean, I remember that, that telescope you're talking about. When we were kids, my grandmother owned a cottage, and the cousins and aunts and uncles would all be up there. And I still remember having one of those telescopes you're talking about, and we could never find a thing with
Yeah.
it. We
Yeah. You
tried and
can't.
we tried and we got so frustrated and was like, what the hell is the point? It's like I said,
Yeah.
don't buy a telescope at Costco, don't buy a telescope at Canadian Tire. Those things are just a waste of
They
your
are.
time, right?
And,
And they'll
and,
just
and
frustrate you and
they'll
sort of,
ruin the hobby for you. I
yeah.
guarantee it. So, binoculars, though, about the same budget, and they will show you craters on the moon. You'll be able to see the disk of Jupiter and the moons around Jupiter. You'll be able to separate, binary stars, Nizar and Algol being my personal favorite. Um, they're very fun and very useful. So they can be inexpensive, and as I said, they're multi-purpose. You can also get something called a Dobsonian. Now, the guy named John Dobson, who I met once and is a pretty interesting character, invented the Dobsonian. It's basically a standard Newtonian reflector. So, to give you an idea, this is a long tube with a mirror at the bottom and an eyepiece near the top. But what Dobson's innovation was to make the mount extremely easy to use and very inexpensive to build because he was doing street astronomy with it. He was actually a Christian brother, and part of their mission was to do street astronomy. Anyway, so you basically can set this thing up. They've got some tabletop versions. You can get like a 4 inch or a 6 inch, and you basically set them up. They're easy to point at an object. You look through the eyepiece. You'll be able to see in detail the moon. You'll be able to see Jupiter. You'll be able to see bands on Jupiter. You'll be able to see the moons of Jupiter. You'll be able to see the rings around Saturn. If you look at Orion, you'll be able to see some detail in the Orion Nebula. Great, and they're not expensive. They go kind of anywhere from, I mean, the high end can get pretty expensive, but you can get them for as low as $250, and you can get a pretty good one for about 600.
Yeah.
So definitely worth considering.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
that's a question people ask, sometimes too, is like how much is a good telescope? And I'm like, well, you're probably spending a few $100s to get something, but it's not a question of how much is a good telescope. It's how much are you willing to spend on a telescope? Like
Yeah,
decide on a budget and then go looking, right? Because
that's the trick. That's the
yeah,
absolute trick.
yeah, don't
And
don't think, oh, okay, if I spend $500, I'm going to do well. No, decide on a budget and then see, what falls in your range and whether it's,
yeah,
worth the money
yeah,
that you think you're going to spend.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, no good telescope is gonna basically, people talk about magnification, and I get this question asked at the observatory all the time. But how much magnification on the telescope? That question is actually quite meaningless. Right? Astronomers aren't particularly interested in magnification. We're interested in light gathering power, and that's defined by the size of the primary optical component. In the case of a Dobsonian, it's a reflector. In the case of binoculars, it's the front lens. So, don't fixate on magnification. That's the wrong path. Look at what you can afford and then just do some research, go online. But a Dobsonian reflector is a great place to start. Another place to go is with And I'm going to actually recommend a brand here, although there are alternatives to this. A company called ZWO has a product called the Sea Star, and Celestron has an equivalent, although it's much more expensive. But the Sea Star S50 and S30 astrographs come in the $400, $700 range. Now, these are not telescopes that you can look through, but basically they're extremely easy to set up. You open the box, turn them on, load the app on your phone, set them up. It takes about a minute to set up. It will recommend things to look at. You press a button, telescope will move to that place, and it starts taking pictures, and the pictures show up on your phone or your tablet, and you can save them. It'll do all the image processing. They're amazing for that kind of budget. The S30 is a smaller option. It's the lower cost. The S50 is the bigger one. Apparently, Seastar is announcing they're planning on doing an S70 as well, yet bigger still. But either of those, I've got one. I take it when I travel because it's so portable. They weigh like 1.5 kilos. They're in a very small, they come with a case that's very sturdy, and you will not go wrong with them. But I think we are getting tight for time now. So Mary Helen, it's time to do our advertising and talk about stocking stuffers. And darn it, Allan I Carswell Observatory swag.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you to talk
Yeah,
about your
so
favorite piece of swag.
if you look, the easiest place to get it is the York bookstore. If you go in there, you will find they have t-shirts for the the observatory. There are mugs and a variety of other postcards and small posters. Everything you're looking in the sort of $5 to $30 price range. And the great thing about this swag is it does help support the observatory. When we have our telescope tours, we do have them available. Unfortunately, because of the way we are set up, we can only accept cash. But if you happen to be at the observatory, like in the next couple of weeks, and there's some you'd really like to take a look, if you have the cash, we can, get it out and show you and see if there is something you want. But it's like I said, we've got some lovely mugs, we've got postcards, we've got t-shirts, and a whole variety of other things. If you look on the observatory website, some of it is there too. Or if you go to the York bookstore, there you can order it online and either pick it up at the bookstore, which means you can do it at your own convenience, or, I think they even ship to you. I'm not exactly sure what they use for shipping, but, there are
Yeah,
quite a number of options. Um,
yeah,
so it's like I said, there's a few things, and the great thing about this stuff is, part of the proceeds do go to help support the observatory. We did have quite a bit of this stuff available at our Astro Fair, um, which we'll be having again coming next year. So we will, there's lots of options for the astronomer in your life, or, just as an interesting gift for anybody who's kind of got an interest in science. I have about 50 different mugs from all kinds of different situations. Actually, I think one of the few ones that don't have, York related is an observatory mug. I think my husband would kill me if I bought any more. Our cupboard is stuffed with mugs of all descriptions, which is why I gave up that and started collecting fridge magnets when I traveled anywhere because the mugs are taking up too much space.
it's funny because I also have a good mug collection. Although I'm not the culprit on buying them here, my wife is. We travel a fair bit, and when we travel, she always brings home souvenir mugs, which get used. We make sure they're practical and can be used. But I do have a NASA mug, and I have a York University mug, and I have my AICO mug. And I will tell you, coffee tastes best coming from that particular mug. So the mugs are great. And a mug does make a great stocking stuffer if you think about it. Something small, something affordable, and always usable. Another couple of things, we do have postcards, as you said, we have posters, we have t-shirts, we have a shopping bag, which I like. I use that all the time, and it's great because it's got a zip. A lot of the shopping bags you take, when you go to the grocery store, they don't have zips. This one's got a zip, which I find really kind of cool. Uh, they at events you can also get York University branded coasters. Those are kind of popular. They come in a set. But you have to actually, they're not sold through the bookstore. You actually have to go to the observatory tours or for the Astro Fair for that. Um, uh, and of course, we've got a big event coming just in a little bit. It should be hitting the bookstore and it will be online shortly. Is the annual, in this case, the 2026 edition of the Allan I. Carswell astronomy calendar. And I was very happy to serve as the lead editor on that project this year and last year. And so I'll take a minute to plug it, but also talk about it. So um, the calendar is based entirely on student images. Okay, so or images that were donated to the observatory specifically for the calendar. So many of the images are taken by our 1 meter telescope and processed. Then we've got a couple of the students who have done independent work from using the observatory as part of the observatory's function, but they're not doing it with the observatory telescopes. They may be using their own private telescopes or other telescopes they've got access to and taking several images. We try to cover a variety of different things. We've got some images in there of the observatory as well. And we've got this year, for the first time, we're introducing a 16-month calendar. So it goes from January 2026 to the end of April 2027. And we did that because last year we realized we left out our information page, but we wanted to make the information page something that people would want to look at. So we decided to add a mini 4-month calendar at the end with our information page with a great image captured by by our observing team and processed by Poria, who's one of our observers, did a great job of it. And we built the information page around that, and it looks fantastic. So it's something to consider. A lot of student effort went into it. It's not expensive and makes a great stocking stuffer. I mean, giving a calendar at Christmas is as Christmassy as anything else you're ever going to do. So there's, I guess, the pitch from the observatory. It's a student-run observatory. We live on donations and proceeds from the things like the swag and the calendar and whatnot. So it's a great way to support us and to get back something at the same time.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead, Marianne. Go
No,
ahead, Melanie.
never mind. Go ahead.
Okay, so friends, it's time to close up our first ever holiday special. Thank you for joining us. And thank you even more so if you buy some stocking stuffers or a calendar. People really work hard on that. You've been listening to York Universe, the astronomy and astrophysics podcast, written and presented by the students, faculty, alumni, and friends of York University. This podcast and past episodes are available wherever podcasts are distributed. You can also connect with us on Instagram with the handle at York U Observatory or on Facebook at Allan I Carswell Ob. Our website is yorku.ca/science/observatory. And there we have a lot of interesting content, including swag. And if you feel so inclined, it's a great place to make a Canadian tax-deductible donation to our student-operated not-for-profit observatory. Thanks for tuning in this evening. We wish you happy holidays, clear skies, and good evening.